Here's what I learned while going for the Bushido ball cherry in UFO 50. This game is similar to Pong, where the goal is to keep the ball from getting past you and past the edge of the screen. First to 8 points wins the match. After beating an opponent, you'll move on to face the next opponent until you've defeated all 5 other characters. For the cherry, you have to beat all 5 characters without using a single continue. First things first, I'd recommend you play with a controller. The angle you hit the ball from affects a lot in this game, and with the keyboard inputs it's difficult to achieve this reliably. So let's go over the controls of the game. The control screen doesn't really give you the full picture, it only tells you that you can hit and you can roll. There's also an alternate attack and a charge attack. You can use the ult or charge attack when you have some charge bar, which you can see at the top of your screen. The ult attack costs half a bar and the charge attack costs a whole bar. You can get up to 3 bars available at one time and it resets in between matches. You gain charge simply by hitting the ball consistently. Getting hit by an enemy's ult attack removes half of a charge bar. An important thing to note that the game doesn't explain to you is that you can interrupt your roll with a hit, which will cause you to hit a curveball. Get used to using the curve hit, as this is a great way of sneaking lots of points, particularly in the first 3 matches. It is possible to deflect a charge hit, often just with a well-timed hit, although sometimes you'll need to button mash the hit button in order to send it back at your attacker. Be ready for this every time a charge hit comes your way, as sometimes within half a second of not spamming the button, the ball will just get past you. Oftentimes the best reaction to a charge hit is to just roll into it. If you don't interrupt your roll with a hit, you get more distance from it. You can block the ball without hitting it by just standing in the way. This does mean that it goes back with minimal momentum, so it's hard to score from this, but sometimes it's the only way to stop the ball. It's worth noting that you can also get penalties for things such as hitting an opponent with the standard hit, stalling, or hitting it on their serve. Once you get 3 penalties shown by the red books at the bottom of the screen, your opponent gets a goal. I never found this to be an issue in my attempts though. I will go into detail about all of the characters, but first let me give a little bit more general knowledge. Your opponent is randomized each time you play until you beat every opponent. From what I could tell, the AI difficulty increases, particularly after the 3rd game, making the last 2 a lot harder. This is also when the curveball is less effective, although it's still fine to use. Even the characters you're better at playing against can be a real pain to beat. I struggled the most against this guy here, so I was always hoping to get him within the first 3 games. In my successful run, I faced him in the 3rd match. I utilised the curveball a lot in my matches. It works well against everyone if it's the first 3 games particularly, apart from for Budget Shredder over here. He's able to hit above and below him, which makes him too good at defending, as typically the curveballs curve into him. One detail to bear in mind is you don't always want to go for a curveball, sometimes just a regular hit or just rolling the full distance to get the block is what's needed. Now let's talk about the different characters, since each choice has a different ult and charge hit. You should bear in mind someone that works for you, but also consider what you don't want to play against, since you won't have to play versus the character that you select. Each character has different stats, and while noticeable in game, I don't feel like they make a meaningful difference. I personally choose based more on the abilities. Let's start with Raizo, since it's the character I chose to use primarily. I chose him because I thought he had some of the better abilities and was also a real pain to play against. His ult hit is this wave of attacks, which is short range but great at finalising a point if the opponent is in range to get hit. If you use it correctly, you can hit the ball and your opponent, which means that they can't hit the ball back. At the very least, you should force them into the button spam mode. This is a bit risky however, since if the AI hits the ball at an angle and you miss, you've essentially crowd controlled yourself and are unlikely to be able to block it. Each character's charge attack is different. For lack of a better explanation, Raizo's charge hit is relatively unpredictable, curving at rapid speed towards the opponent. Now this isn't unique to this character, but every time you concede a point the ball is served to you. One good thing I utilised a lot is whenever I had a charge hit available and it was my serve, I would charge hit the ball from the bottom left so that it would go towards the top right of the court. I found that this was a very consistent way of getting points. Of course the exception is when you face Barney cosplay over here. Next up is Kotaro. Kotaro's ult hit is a projectile. It covers the entire map and can be used to stun your opponent or also to redirect the ball. You can even use this to hit the ball that is served on the opponent's side of the court, which can lead to some very unfair feeling goals. It's worth noting that with a well-timed hit, his projectile can be sent back, so be wary of that. His charge hit is the most standard. As far as I can tell, it's just a directional charge hit that's slightly faster than some of the others. Since the charge hits are so fast, it's often best to just try and roll into them, although it is possible to hit them back as I mentioned before. Ayumi's ult is to place caltrips on the ground. When the ball comes in contact with these, it changes direction, sometimes drastically. I hated using these and playing against them, since I found them so unpredictable. It's worth noting if you're playing against it, you can hit the caltrips to turn them to your colour, which makes them work more in your favour. Although sometimes, colour doesn't matter and it just goes crazy. If you run into a caltrip, you get stunned, although this is easy to avoid. Ayumi's charge hit is as shown. I always struggle to stop this charge hit, but my recommendation would be to roll either to the top or the bottom of the map, just in the hopes that you can block it. Attempting to hit this one back is very tough since it sweeps so aggressively at the end. When playing against Ayumi in the first 3 rounds, it's very easy to get points with the curveball. Position like I do here, and quite often she would send the ball slightly up and you can get an easy curve hit to get an immediate point. Sometimes she can break the cycle with a charge hit or just by being unpredictable, however I found this a great way to score points against her easily. Tomoe is a bit tougher than the previous ones in my opinion. His alternate is a grapple that is somewhat seeking and can either seek to the ball or to the opponent. It's great for stopping charge hits as long as you don't react too late. For this reason I also tend to avoid using my own charge hits when playing against him, since it's easy for him to stop them. Tomoe's charge hits project illusions of the ball, only one of them being the real ball. This can be tricky to play against since it's essentially a guess which ball is the real one. As always, using your ult is a great way to make up the distance to stop the charge hit, even if in this case you are guessing. To be fair, the charge hits are so fast I often feel like I'm guessing anyway. Now on to Chiyome, who's interesting because his dodge is actually a teleport. I actually thought this made it harder to use, however if used correctly, I'm sure it would be viable. Chiyome's ult is similar to Kotaro's, it's a line projectile that interacts in the same way. If there's a difference, I'm unaware of it. This means you can do the same tricks as with Kotaro, where you can hit the ball on your opponent's side. His charge hit makes the ball invisible and you can only see marks showing its trajectory. This isn't too difficult to block, however it can be difficult to predict if it bounces off a wall. Another thing to note playing against Chiyome is that he is similarly easy to get with the curveball trick, more so in the first 3 rounds. My most hated character is this Dinobot looking motherfucker. Instead of dodging up or down, you throw your staff above or below. This is absolutely godlike for defense, particularly in the bot's hands. It completely invalidates my curveball strategy and it's just a massive pain to get past in general. He doesn't have so much in terms of speed to make up for this, but I still find it the toughest one to play against. His alternate is a bomb. This is absolutely the most overpowered ult in the game. If the ball is hit into the bomb from either player, it goes sporadically back towards the opponent of this Yoshimitsu wannabe. It is possible to defend against, but it feels more like luck than anything else. There is so much variation in the curve the ball gets from the bomb. Sometimes it curves straight into the goal. The only saving grace is that if you're playing against him you can hit the bombs to explode them preemptively, although this is tough to do while also being focused on hitting the ball. His charge hit is actually pretty easy to counteract. The ball sharply takes 2 90-degree turns to reposition at high speed far from the initial trajectory. Since you know this is happening, if you stand facing the charge, you can roll into the ball reactively depending on which direction you see it go. Just make sure you don't interrupt your roll with a hit or it may not make up the distance. And that about does it. That's everything that I learned in my journey to getting Cherry. I wish you the best of luck in your attempts. As with most of the games in the UFO 50, this is very challenging, so don't get discouraged. I'm sure you can do it. If you want to see the uninterrupted run, you can click the card on screen or check the description. Thanks for watching.